everybody. Welcome to our California Community Colleges Support Undocumented Student Week. Just a reminder, this week we are hosting this webinar series with Immigrants Rising. This week is a collaboration with the California Community Colleges Chancellor's Office, the Community College League, and Immigrants Rising, among others. I'm so excited to be here with all of you today to talk about entrepreneurship. So again, this is the Undocumented Student Week of Action. And just a heads up that we have lots of different webinars taking place throughout this whole week. Today we are on Wednesday exploring entrepreneurship. Tomorrow we're going to have prioritizing mental health. And Friday we're going to have art as advocacy. So please stay tuned for the rest of the week. And so now, again, I am going to be talking, my name is Ileana Perez, and I'm going to be talking about the Undocu Hustle, Alternatives to Employment Through Entrepreneurship. This is a initiative by Immigrants Rising, which is formerly called Educators for Fair Consideration. But before we get started with all the great information, I do want to get us off started to learn a little bit more about this concept that we call the Undocu Hustle. So I'm going to get some support here to play our video.
To think of your wildest, craziest, but legal business idea?
I think the Undocu Hustle is really sort of a concept that every single undocumented person has to go through in this country to be able to make it here. I just have always grown up with the entrepreneurial spirit. My dad started working in the fields in the Central Valley and dairy construction, and just basically took the step to start his own business. We have to be creative. We have to be entrepreneurial and create our own opportunities. How are individuals living the Undocu Hustle? How were they able to launch their businesses? What kind of businesses did I have? We invited undocumented entrepreneurs from across the country to come share their experiences. We also were able to provide business workshops and also a Shark Tank, which is really exciting, where we brought funders and investors to provide feedback on pitches, and ultimately some of the entrepreneurs ended up getting funded.
I'm the co-founder of the Family Reunions Project, and we use 360 video and virtual reality to immerse undocumented families in the places they can't physically return to.
Our idea was basically to import Tibetan hand-woven rugs from India and Nepal, made by Tibetan refugees, and sell them online and in stores. By bringing me close to all these amazing undocumented young entrepreneurs who are doing such great work, that's where I draw most of my inspiration from. It took me a long time, but right now it's like, okay, yes, I'm an entrepreneur now. So it feels good when they ask you how you do it, how you did it.
For me, entrepreneurship made me realize what I was good at, and I want you to reflect on what you're good at. So in sharing my story, now there are people starting to like reminisce, and when did I show an entrepreneurial mindset? And hopefully going forward, like when we see these moments of people being really creative, responsible risk takers, maybe we can explore an idea, because you can learn a lot from putting out your own idea and starting something of your own. What goes on in these spaces is practical advice people can use.
Again, we have a list of resources that we're going to continue to build upon for everyone across the nation to get access to entrepreneurship support. I think for many undocumented individuals, the undocumented identity can really be their own limiting factor in what they can do. So when I talk about the Undocu Hustle or these entrepreneurship opportunities, I tell individuals, just forget about your immigration status. Just, this is the opportunity, don't think about it. This has nothing to do with being undocumented. So what would you do? What can you do? Get your Undocu Hustle on. Thank you.
Okay, And that video is available on our website on immigrantsrising.org in case anybody would like to share that video. So now we're going to dive into the presentation. I am going to start by giving a very brief testimony about who I am. So very briefly, came to this country in 1995 from Mexico, settled in the Central Valley, and navigated the educational system as an undocumented student all the way up to the first year of my PhD program. I did ultimately become a DACA recipient in 2013. And some pictures here show a few of my graduations. Here's a picture of my master's graduation from Claremont Graduate University. And just about a month ago, I did defend my dissertation from Claremont Graduate University that focused on entrepreneurship, millennial entrepreneurs. If in case anybody is more interested in that research, I'm happy to talk about that later. But in terms of my work related to entrepreneurship, I was very fortunate to come across the fabulous Kathy Jin, who's the Executive Director of Educators for Fair Consideration, now Immigrants Rising. And when I met Kathy a few years ago, I had just graduated from college, from my undergrad as an undocumented student, and was trying to figure out what opportunities exist for undocumented students post-college. That was the big question I had. And so Kathy encouraged me to seek answers. And so I ultimately ended up interviewing 13 undocumented individuals that were undocumented that had graduated from college. And it turns out that there are lots of different opportunities for undocumented students related to graduate school, professional school, and also there are ways to earn a living through entrepreneurship. So this really became sort of the start of trying to explore these alternatives to employment through entrepreneurship. So since around 2011, when I originally joined Immigrants Rising, since then we've been creating a lot of resources and educating individuals about these alternatives to employment. But it wasn't until around 2013, when I rejoined the organization to revamp a lot of the contents related to entrepreneurship and really extracting that out of the context of higher education, because entrepreneurship is actually an opportunity for anyone, regardless of immigration status, regardless of educational attainment. So we wanted to make sure that individuals were equipped with this information, particularly with DACA being in limbo, as many of us know. So we want to make sure that folks are prepared and really to lose a little bit of that fear related to the possibility of DACA no longer existing. But before that, I'm actually going to turn my video off and I'll come back for the Q&A. Okay. So before I dive into the entrepreneurship content, a little bit about Immigrants Rising. Again, this is formerly Educators for Fair Consideration. We just changed our name a couple of months ago. So it's taken us a while to switch into that new name. So you can find all this great information on our website called immigrantsrising.org. We have lots of programs where we offer financial support. We have different educational partnerships. We have leadership opportunities, which I'll talk about in terms of our entrepreneurship fellows, programs related to storytelling as well, many resources in the forms of guides, webinars, handouts, lots of different topics related to art and empowerment, college access, entrepreneurship, which is primarily what I'll be talking about today, immigration policy, paying for college. We also have several services. We do give in-person or virtual presentations. So if you would like to request more presentations related to entrepreneurship or college access or policy, there is an online form that you can complete on our site on immigrantsrising.org. In addition to that, we have this really great service, a couple of great services. We have one called the Immigrant Legal Intake Service, where we have a group of individuals that are able to review immigration cases. This is open nationwide for any individuals that may have never gotten an opportunity to get their cases reviewed. We have the service available on our site. We also recently launched the California In-State Tuition Tool, which is an awesome interactive tool that allows individuals to determine whether or not they're eligible for California in-state. There are lots of different bills that recently passed, which you may have heard of in previous webinars. So this tool allows individuals to figure out what they're able to access to pay for college. So a little bit more about our entrepreneurship initiative. So here's a bit of a timeline. So as I mentioned before, I initially joined Immigrants Rising in 2012, around 2011, and in 2012 is when we released what's called, or what was called now called Immigrants Rising Life After College Guide for Undocumented Students, which again provided a menu of options for undocumented students post-college, including alternatives to employment. So this really became the first publication where we talked about these alternatives to employment through entrepreneurship. Fast forwarding in 2016, Kathy spearheaded the effort to create a fund specifically for undocumented social entrepreneurs. We actually just changed the name of the fund to Immigrants Rising Entrepreneurship Fund. We just closed the application. We received a little over 200 applications and have selected semifinalists to be part of a second round. This fund entails providing $50,000 grants to 5 social entrepreneurs. So definitely be on the lookout for this next year when our application reopens again, and definitely be on the lookout again to see who we end up providing these awards to. So as I mentioned before, when I rejoined Immigrants Rising around 2016, I'm losing track of all the years, and around 2016, I was tasked with creating additional resources. So the first resource that we came up with was E4OC's ITIN guide, which provided a lot of information about the differences between the Social Security and the ITIN. And this is particularly important given the fact that DACA, as we know, is in limbo. We've seen that there's a lot of confusion between the Social Security number that was granted to DACA recipients and the ITIN that many of us may have already had. So this guide really talks about a lot of those differences. So in addition to that, the idea was that I was going to publish another guide focusing around entrepreneurship. It actually turned out to be a full-blown initiative. So we launched our Entrepreneurship Initiative in 2017. Some elements related to that, we do have a pilot entrepreneurship program with San Francisco Unified School District, and the purpose of that pilot program is to provide entrepreneurship curriculum to high school students. We realize that, that given the situation with DACA, at the moment, no high school student is able to receive DACA, which means that high school students really need to be learning about these alternatives to employment at an early age. More than anything, to get them motivated that there are ways for individuals to earn a living with their trade or with their majors, with their careers, despite not having work authorization through DACA. In 2017, we also hosted a Festival of Undocumented Innovation, which brought together over 50 immigrant young entrepreneurs from across the nation to San Francisco. We provided some business development training. We also had a Shark Tank where individuals were given the opportunity to pitch both their for-profit and nonprofit ideas to funders and investors, and some individuals actually ended up getting funding. So this was our first attempt to really try to understand who is out there in terms of individuals interested in entrepreneurship and what kind of support is needed and what kind of support can we offer and refer individuals to. In addition to that, this year we did launch, as I mentioned, our Entrepreneurship Fellowship. This photo is a picture of our fellows, this year's fellows. We started off with 8 fellows from across the country in Texas, in Florida, in New York, in Chicago, and a few folks in California. The idea behind the fellows is that we needed to build capacity, and these individuals are helping us identify different policies and different networks in their respective states. In addition to that, we're hoping to launch this UndocuHustle podcast where we're going to be interviewing immigrant entrepreneurs to learn more about the stories. I think oftentimes when I talk about entrepreneurship, it's kind of difficult to really figure out, like, what do people do as entrepreneurs? How do people get started? You know, how do people get started with an idea? Things like that. So then we're hoping that this podcast will illuminate some of these stories. In terms of the entrepreneurship resources that are available, we did have, last year we launched a webinar series that included some handouts and some complete guides. So on this slide, you can see the different topics that we offer. So there's information about an introduction to working for yourself, which basically would be a more in-depth presentation about the topics I'll cover today. There's another webinar and guide on ITINs, EINs, and how to pay taxes as independent contractors or business owners. We've been able to collaborate with several other organizations that support entrepreneurs. So we've been able to do another webinar on choosing a business structure that was done with Prospera Co-ops. We did another webinar on accessing financial capital with the help of Mission Asset Fund. We did another great webinar for those of you that are interested in writing a business plan but don't know how to do it. You may want to watch this webinar that was done with Central Community Partners. They actually have an app that consists of a series of questions that you answer, and it automatically turns that into a business plan. We also did another webinar related to immigration remedies through entrepreneurship with Dan Berger, who's a lawyer. And the last webinar we did was on worker co-ops with Democracy at Work Institute, which I'll talk a little bit more about in the next few slides. So the idea behind these resources is that as much as I would like to talk about all the information related to entrepreneurship, given the limited time constraints in a presentation, the idea is that you would go on to watch another webinar, you would go on to read an entire guide to learn more about all of these topics. All of the webinars have been pre-recorded, so you can either watch the recording, read the guides, download the guides. Everything is completely free and accessible on our website, again, on immigrantsrising.org. So now I'm going to dive into these alternative ways to earn a living through entrepreneurship. So the three options that I typically talk about are primarily working for yourself, which is also independent contracting or working as a consultant or being self-employed. In addition to that, the way I think about it is that there's different steps to move beyond independent contracting or working for yourself, where you actually incorporate into a business. These are just a couple of different types of business structures. There are actually many ways to incorporate as a business, but the ones I typically talk most about are the sole proprietorship, where somebody owns the business on their own. And then there's also more information on some of the guides about partnerships and different corporations. But for the purposes of today's presentation, I'll only touch upon the sole proprietorship and the LLC worker cooperative model. This is perhaps the most important slide in terms of understanding why entrepreneurship is a viable option for any immigrant, regardless of immigration status. So many of you may be familiar with the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986, called IRCA, which adjusted the immigration status of millions of undocumented people. At the same time that it adjusted the status of millions of undocumented people and provided work authorization, it also aimed to prevent any other undocumented immigrants from coming into the country, which is why it created the I-9 system. So those of you that may have been able to work as employees have had to fill out an I-9 that requires proof of work authorization, Social Security, etc. However, embedded in IRCA, and again, this is federal law, there is an exception that states that an individual is not required to obtain Form I-9 for individuals that are interested in working as independent contractors or business owners. The reason this exception was left in this federal law is because foreign individuals, regardless of immigration status, actually are able to invest and create new businesses in the country as long as everybody pays their taxes. So the U.S. actually welcomes individuals to come to this country to invest and contribute to the economy. And so that's why there's two different entities. There's DHS and then there's the IRS. The two typically do not speak to each other. And the reason, again, for that is because the U.S. wants to encourage business ownership in the U.S. There is a federal statute that everybody should know about that does prohibit entities. So this prohibits clients from knowingly engaging with undocumented people who provide services as contractors or business owners. Basically, what this means is that the clients are held responsible for conducting business with somebody that they know is undocumented. The knowingly piece is a little bit nuanced in that it's complicated to figure out exactly how an individual knew. This is for the most part based on written evidence that could be found like on email or any written communication. And again, the individuals that would be liable, that would typically have to face civil fines, criminal penalties, would be the clients, not the actual workers themselves. But it's just to know that in these types of interactions, it is advised that individuals actually do not ask any questions about immigration status. And again, it's definitely allowed, as is written in federal law. But as long as there's no paper record of individuals fully knowing that an individual is undocumented, that's how all of this works. So specifically in California, we're very fortunate to have a lot of immigrant-friendly policies, but specifically related to, as we know, higher education, which probably have been talked about in previous webinars, but related to being able to work and pursue entrepreneurship. There's a lot of really exciting bills that really support any immigrant, regardless of immigration status. So for example, SB 1159 is super exciting because this allows any individual, regardless of immigration status, to apply to professional licensing. The way that this is combined with entrepreneurship is that individuals can get licensed as professional accountants, architects, CPAs, counselors, etc. And if they are not able to work as employees because they don't have work authorization, individuals can actually work as independent contractors or start a business in their given trade, major, or field that's related to these professional licensing. There is more information on our site. We have a whole guide that also talks about SB 1159. So the IRS does have clear guidelines for independent contracting. So not individuals who are working as employees or categorized as employees can't just do the same type of job as independent contractors. The reason the IRS has created these guidelines is really to prevent employers from exploiting the workers. So when somebody works as an independent contractor, that person is held responsible for paying for Medicare, for paying for taxes, which a lot of this responsibility would typically be held on the employer side. So the IRS does a lot of audits in order to ensure that employers are not misclassifying their workers. So these laws are called the common law rules as stated by the IRS, and they basically are related to behavioral, which means that individuals should be able to conduct their own work and are able to dictate their own hours and the way the work is done. Financial is that the independent contractors are the ones responsible for the negotiation, the contracting, and for establishing a certain rate for the work. And then the type of relationship is clearly an independent contractor-client relationship instead of an employee and employer relationship. So to give you a better idea of some of the differences between an employee and independent contractor. So an employee typically has a continuing relationship, meaning that an employee goes into work every day at 8, probably clocks out at 5. As an independent contractor, that individual can work for multiple clients and is not by any means required to be at the office at any given time. An employee typically has significant tools, materials, an office, a desk, computers, chairs, etc., while an independent contractor typically has his or her own tools and equipment, and may even work from home or from some external office that is not part of the office provided by the employee. As an employee, that person can quit at any time without incurring any liability. As an independent contractor, that's really complicated to quit because you're kind of your own boss. So you get to determine as an independent contractor, you get to determine as an independent contractor when you want to stop a contract with an employer. As an employee, you must comply with instructions about when, where, and how the work is done, whereas an independent contractor typically sets his or her own hours and determines how much time is going to be spent on any given contract. An employee is trained by the employer to do the work in a very specific way, whether it's branding or whether it's providing specific information related to the job, whereas an independent contractor gets to determine how the work is done. And again, there's very specific tests that the IRS does in order to ensure that individuals are categorized correctly. So just a couple of months ago, the California Supreme Court did establish a new set of rules in order to categorize independent contractors and differentiate the categorization between employees and independent contractors. We're still in the middle of really identifying what the new test will be. So again, in addition to the federal test that is mandated by the IRS, the common law rules, each state is also able to create their own test for the purposes of categorizing wage workers. So they implemented this new ABC test. Basically what this test is stating is really limiting the type of work that is being done with an independent contractor, in that independent contractors cannot be doing a type of work that could be done by an employee. The best example I can give is perhaps one of a law firm. A law firm working with independent contractor lawyers, even though they could be categorized as independent contractors, this new test would not allow these individuals to work as independent contractors if they can actually be categorized as employees. I know it's a little bit complicated, and again, we're still trying to identify how this will affect and how this will roll out, how this will be really regulated. So there will be more information, but this is just for people to be aware that not everybody can be an independent contractor, and there are clear rules that need to be followed. We are also very excited about recently signed California legislation. So these three pieces of legislation will take effect on January 1st of next year. They were just signed by Governor Brown. The first one, AB 2184, is the Immigrant Business Inclusion Act, which requires every city to accept the ITIN for individuals to establish a business. Even though this is written in federal law, some research indicated that many states were not allowing the use of the ITIN for incorporating a business. But now this pretty much gives a mandate that every single city now has to accept an ITIN. SB 946 is the State Sidewalk Vending Act, which basically legalized street vending in the state of California. This is really excited again for many individuals who were really working under the table and were facing a lot of penalties because of the type of work that was being done related to street vending. So we're really excited that this passed. The last one that I wanted to mention is AB 626, which is the Homemade Food Operations Permit, which allows the sale of home-cooked food and allows producers to sell up to $50,000 a year. So again, all this is really intended to encourage and support entrepreneurship in the state of California. All this, again, is regardless of immigration status. So now a little bit more about the process to work as an independent contractor or a business owner. So there's a form called the W-7 form. By the way, all these forms are found online. You can do a basic Google search. We also have a lot of guides as well that walk you through all the different types of forms that are needed. So the W-7 form is needed for anybody that does not have a social security number and is not eligible to get one. So this is again, individuals who do not have a social security number can get an ITIN, and with the use of an ITIN, individuals can earn a living as independent contractors and start a business. But you definitely need one or the other, either the ITIN or the social security number. From there, you need a W-9 form, and a W-9 form, the sole purpose of it is to keep track of the money that is being transferred from a client to an independent contractor or business owner. The W-9 form is very simple. It simply asks for your name, the name of the business, either in ITIN, a social security number, or an employer identification number in case that somebody already has an established business, and that's it. It does not require work authorization, and it also does not require having a social security number. So the W-9 form is giving to every single one of the clients. So if an independent contractor or a business has 5 clients, you give out 5 W-9s. And then at the end of the year, a 1099 is sent back to you via email from the person, from each one of the clients. And the sole purpose of the 1099 is really just to have a sum of the amount of money that was given for a particular service. In addition to these sort of IRS required forms, which again are simply for the purposes of monetary transactions, it is always advised to have a written contract. This again does a couple of things. It establishes the independent contractor-client relationship. In addition to that, it also can be used in case that the client, is not willing to pay for a particular service. The independent contractor or business owner can sue that client, and it has to be the established amount has to be written in the contract. So there are definitely a lot of benefits to the contract. And in some of our guides, we do have samples of different contracts that can be used. In addition to that, what's different also about an independent contractor or business owner is that individuals have to keep track of their own hours and have to be able to invoice. So unlike an employee that gets paid through payroll, perhaps gets paid overtime, independent contractors and business owners are in control of that. So individuals that choose to do this kind of work definitely need to stay organized and keep track of all the hours that are being worked. My recommendation is to use something like myhours.com, which is a platform used to keep track of hours worked. So a little bit more information about the ITIN. Again, so the IRS issues ITINs regardless of immigration status. Its only purpose is really just for federal tax reporting, although it can also be used to build credit and open bank accounts. Again, you can get one by filling out the form W-7. So the ITIN guide has a lot of detail, and it actually has all the different steps, all the IDs that are required to get an ITIN. Just a heads up, a renewal did kick in last year, and basically the point of the renewal is that the IRS needs to clean out the ITIN system. So for example, those of us who were able to get Social Security numbers through DACA should have actually written letters to the IRS, to credit reporting agencies, stating that we now have a Social Security number and will no longer be using the ITIN. The ITIN guide also has all the different letters that I personally wrote to the IRS and that I wrote to the credit reporting agencies to change my number from the ITIN to the Social Security number. So more information about that on the guide. Again, there's more information here about the renewal process that is currently in place. In addition to that, really, really important to know that DACA recipients should continue to always use their Social Security numbers and never go back to using the ITIN. Again, the only reason to get an ITIN is if somebody does not have a Social Security number. And so that, even though it gets very complicated, because I know for DACA recipients or Social Security cards specifically stay not valid with that work authorization. Well, all these alternatives to employment, the Social Security number is still valid because, again, we're not talking about work authorization. And again, it's two different entities. It's DHS and it's the IRS that are typically not communicating with each other. So the point is DACA recipients should always continue to use the Social Security numbers, never go back to the ITIN. Any individual without a Social Security number, those are the folks that need to be getting an ITIN in order to do this type of work. I won't go through this entire slide, but it's just important to know that filing taxes as an independent contractor or business owner is very different from filing taxes as an employee. It does require being organized, being prepared. I highly suggest working with a tax preparer that is familiar with independent contractor taxes and business taxes, because it does require having a lot of documentation about expenses, about deductions. It can get kind of complicated if you're doing both employee and independent contractor taxes. So there's an entire webinar just on filing taxes because it is that important to stay organized. So I won't go through all of these. I'll just go through the main points of tips to start earning a living as an independent contractor. Very important to really understand these independent contractor and business logistics. So all these different guidelines, making sure that you're following, that you're abiding by the independent contractor rules. You're understanding the business structures. You understand how to write a business plan. It's important to also understand that entrepreneurship is very much about a mindset. So any endeavor that's related to entrepreneurship really has to do with a natural talent, maybe a major, a field, a trade. So it really takes some time to think about, what am I good at? What can I learn? What do I enjoy doing that I can turn into an entrepreneurship venture? In addition to that, it is important to learn about marketing and promotion. Entrepreneurship is all about building a network and being able to, sell a particular service or a product to individuals. So it will be important to understand more about marketing and promotion. Lastly, it is very important to understand accessing financial capital. That's probably by far the #1 issue across all different types of entrepreneurs, whether it's small scale, large scale entrepreneurs. All entrepreneurs have a difficult time accessing financial capital. And a big part of this is really just being aware of all the different financial products that exist out there. So again, we do have a webinar that taught in a guide that lays out all the different types of financial capital available. I'm going to touch briefly upon the next few different types of business structures, and I'm only going to touch about them briefly because we do have webinars that are exclusively dedicated to diving in depth into these different types of business structures. So a bit of information about the sole proprietorship. The sole proprietorship is very similar to working as an independent contractor, except that now you're incorporating as a business, doing business as either your name or a chosen name that you would want to do. The liabilities and taxes are very similar to what it would be like to work as an independent contractor, except that now all the work that is being done is done in the name of your business instead of yourself as an individual. Starting a sole proprietorship is very easy. Here are a few steps. Basically, you start off with a business plan. You file for a fictitious name with the state of California, which is very inexpensive. You go to City Hall to register the business. And this is really important. City Hall is the best place to get any information about any type of business anybody is interested in doing. There are lots of businesses that require additional permits, licenses. That City Hall is really the only entity that can provide all that information about how to establish a specific business. It's important to open a business account. You can open it with a social security number, an ITIN, or an EIN. And then other requirements may need to be fulfilled depending on the county. So again, this is once you are ready to establish yourself as a business owner, now it's going to be very much based on the laws and requirements at a local level. So that's why it's so important for you to attend City Hall and ask all the questions about what you need in order to establish the type of business you want. The next business structure that I'm always super excited to talk about is the limited liability corporation, which provides limited liability features of a corporation and tax efficiencies and the flexibility of a partnership. Basically, the LLC is a business and the owners of the LLC are called members. The members could be individuals, people, corporations, or other LLCs. There is typically no maximum number of members, and the majority of states permit having just one member LLCs. The LLC regulations do vary by state, so it's important to really understand what is going on in a given state. It is a little bit more complicated to set up an LLC. It does require to have these articles of incorporation. It does require some fees, but the one sort of element about the LLC worker co-op model is that it really separates the individual from the business itself, which is really particularly exciting for an immigrant, because now all the different forms that I talked about, the W-9 form, the W-9 form specifically, and any contracts, the information that would go into those forms would be the name of the LLC along with a number. The LLCs come with an employer identification number. So now every single contract is now done in the name of the LLC or the worker cooperation instead of an individual. So the benefits of this, and again, is that it sort of creates an umbrella of identity protection for that individual, so that individual does not have to disclose their immigration status at all, because now all the business is done in the name of the LLC. We did do a wonderful webinar with Democracy at Work Institute, and they are the organization that I would point to anybody that is interested in learning more about the worker co-op LLC model. Democracy at Work Institute really does a great job incubating and supporting the creation of worker co-ops and worker co-ops across the nation. They just started Radiate Consulting, which is a co-op that consists of young immigrants that provide nonprofit management, translation, interpretation services, bookkeeping, and administration. So definitely encourage you to check out their site on institute.coop, and definitely take a look at Radiate Consulting on radiateconsulting.coop. So the last couple of slides really are intended to give some tips to start a business as an immigrant. So I know that I may have a couple of students or young individuals interested in starting a business. So here are a couple of tips for you. Number one, make sure you definitely have a valid ITIN or social security number. It's important to brainstorm business ideas and really think about and do your research into all the different aspects that are needed to start a business. So this involves doing research on the licensing, on the permits, on the type of certifications or degrees that are needed to start this business. Again, definitely take advantage of SB 1159 in the state of California. And then it's important to do market research to gather information about the consumer's needs and preferences. Again, as a business owner, you have to be able to sell your product or service to somebody. So you have to do some market research to see if you're going to have, the clients out there that are needed for your business. Important to write a business plan. At any stage where you're at with a business, you definitely need to have a business plan. I highly, highly encourage you to use the Central Community Partners app. Super easy to use. I've done it before. Just ask you a series of questions related to your business and you automatically end up with a business plan, and they actually also end up connecting you to organizations that provide financial capital. Speaking of financial capital, super, super important to think ahead of time how much financial capital you will need to start your business and to keep your business going. This is by far, again, the biggest holdup in a lot of businesses trying to understand how much money do I need. And again, don't be afraid if you do not have a social security number, you can definitely still get access to financial capital with the use of an ITIN. With your ITIN, you can get personal credit, and then if you incorporate as a business, you can get business credit solely with your ITIN. Important to decide the location of your business. So oftentimes for independent contracting, which is what I've done for a long time, most of my business is done at home or it's done at coffee shops, but your business may actually require you to rent a space and to have specific equipment. So you got to think about all of this ahead of time. It's important to choose the correct business structure you want to work under. So again, I highly encourage you to check out our webinar that talked about all the different types of business structures. There are many, and it's just important to know ahead of time what are the pros and cons of each one of the business structures that you want to go into. Important to register your business as a DBA. Again, this is done by the state. So you can go online and register your business, make sure the name you want hasn't been taken. And then again, City Hall is the one that's going to give you the information about the types of business licenses and permits that are needed in your local vicinity. In addition to that, really, really, really important to understand how to pay your taxes as an independent contractor or business owner. It's super important to keep record of all the income that has been paid to you, all your business expenses and deductions, in order for you to not end up paying the full amount of your income. Again, there's a webinar that talks all about this. One of the last slides are talk about our suggestions for colleges to support immigrant entrepreneurs. I understand that we may have a few staff and faculty members from different community colleges. So here are a few tips that I came up with. So one of the things you can do is work with your local law schools to host legal clinics and help set up business structures, or simply just have a group of lawyers or students in law school who may be able to answer questions about business structures. You can work with business schools to host tax and business development workshops to learn more about specific types of business structures, to learn more about taxes, etc. You can find lawyers, entrepreneurs, accountants, and other people in the community who are willing to support immigrant entrepreneurs and help create a network. You can host like an entrepreneurship night where everybody comes together and kind of communicates with each other and identifies the type of support that can be provided. You can encourage college departments to use independent contractor or fellowship models for paid research opportunities for immigrants, regardless of immigration status. So again, you can think about different ways that you can identify different paths that can be done by individuals that could classify as independent contractors, or that could be done through a fellowship model. Another thing you can do is definitely refer people to our resources and curated list of organizations that support immigrant entrepreneurs. There's actually a lot of support out there for immigrant entrepreneurs, whether it's with incorporating or establishing a business. There's legal support, there's access to financial capital. There are many organizations nationwide that provide a lot of support for immigrant entrepreneurs and any entrepreneur in general. So we do have a curated list of these organizations. So it's really just a matter of referring individuals. And then from there, we can provide more information and let people know where they can get additional information depending on their question. So that was my presentation. Again, I really gave a brief overview about lots of different topics, but our website has all the different pre-recorded webinars, has many more guides, and with the help of our entrepreneurship fellows, we are restarting our webinar series. We're hoping to launch in November 1st with a webinar that will be about bootstrapping your business. So be on the lookout for that. You can also join, we have a Facebook group called Entrepreneurs at Immigrants Rising, where we post a lot of information about accessing financial capital, different events that are happening across the country. So thank you so much for your time. You can feel free to reach out to me at ileana@immigrantsrising.org for any other questions you may have. And I believe I did leave, I think we have a few minutes left to answer any questions that may have come up. So, okay, let's see. Now I see that there's something going on.
I have a couple of questions, Ileana.
Yes.
Some questions that came in. One is that you talked about mindset. And in terms of mindset, are you aware of personal coaching or some kind of coaching that takes place for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we have this curated list of different organizations that I can refer individuals to. For example, here in the Bay Area, we do have Mission Asset Fund, we have MEDA, we have Prospera, and I can't remember the names of the other organizations, but there are definitely organizations all across California and across other states that provide this type of support.
Thank you. And then another question that came in was the idea of mentorship. Would that also be included in the guide that you're talking about in terms of how individuals can find mentors? And what are some tips that you would have in terms of actually having students be able to connect with mentors?
That's a good one. So I think there's a couple of different ways. Again, there are different organizations that their sole purpose is to really cultivate the idea of an entrepreneur or help an individual scale or grow their business. So that could be one way to work with an organization. There are also different business coaches that could be hired that can help individuals, again, develop their idea, think about their idea. There are incubators that people can apply for that can also help individuals with entrepreneurship. I think at the community college, that's a very unique place to also identify mentors that are part of the community college network. So it could be individuals that are now entrepreneurs. It could be professors at the community colleges that can also serve as mentors for individuals that are looking for additional support.
Thank you, Ileana. Another question that came in is wondering if there are individuals grants that you're aware of that actually support business owners, and is that maybe going back to the organizations that you listed, such as MEDA or Mission Asset Fund or others throughout the state, the central community partners that could give them more information about that?
Yes, definitely in this curated list, actually the vast majority of organizations that are listed on there provide financial capital. And again, financial capital, that's why I encourage everybody to read the guide I wrote, because there's different types of financial products. So there's anything from like grants and fellowships that are free money for individuals, that they are competitive, such as our Entrepreneurship Fund that does grant individuals with $50,000. It is a competitive process. And just like ours, there are different other ones that are more fellowship. In addition to that, oftentimes I actually find that individuals are really looking for minimal amounts of funding, anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000, which is actually pretty easy to get at either a local bank or a large bank that only requires an ITIN or a social security number. So again, it's really more about learning about the different types of financial products that are out there for any specific business. And again, it all really depends on the amount of funding that you're looking for. really, there are just different ways to get that kind of money. Angel investors, there's like equity, there's lines of credit, there's lots of different things that people may not often know about. So the first suggestion is to definitely be equipped with the information about what's out there, and then from there, figure out what else, what additional items you need, whether it's like equity or something else that you may need for a large amount of money.
Great. Another question, thank you so much. Another question that came in, and if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat or in the question box. Another question that came in was somebody that both is looking to work as a mental health professional. There's also somebody else that was talking about if they actually do go ahead and get licensed as a doctor or a nurse, are they able to open up their own private practice?
I know in the health industry, that's a little bit more complicated, because I know for somebody who does not have work authorization at all, I know that some of the, like the rotations, and again, and I am not a health expert by any means, but I do know that it's a little bit more challenging even to get to medical school. I mean, I know that there's the organization called Pre-Health Dreamers that has been advocating for a few years now and supporting undocumented students in pursuit of health careers. The challenge really is they're not so much related to sort of the business aspect of it, is really more related to what is needed based on immigration status in order to do all the different qualifications, or what's needed in terms of like on the ground experience in order to do these health careers. So I know that one's more challenging, and I am hoping to work with Pre-Health Dreamers a little bit closer to try to identify what is and what is not possible in the health industry.
Thanks, Ileana. Another question came in about real estate. Do you have any ideas in terms of licensing for real estate, or how that might be able to take place?
Yeah, you can definitely get licensed as a realtor. I have a good friend of mine that recently completed the program. She is not eligible for DACA and is able to, is now selling homes. So that is totally a great option. And again, the licensing board in California, you can take a look at all the different professional licensing you can get. Anything that is listed on there, any immigrant, regardless of immigration status, can get.
That's excellent. Another question that came in is, how can individuals who are working as independent contractors who form their own business, could those be hired by the school? Because I know that you had spoken about previously is that if the schools know that an individual is undocumented, how would that work in terms of them being able to contract with somebody that might also be a student? Or would they maybe be looking to do that at a different school?
That one is a little bit more challenging. And this kind of goes back to, so DACA individuals who are currently working as employees and may wish to transfer as independent contractors, it's really about a written record of somebody's immigration status. If it's on the computer system, if there's some type of record that somebody was undocumented, that definitely counts in like the knowingly piece. So, I mean, that one is a little bit more complicated, and it would require perhaps speaking to one of the lawyers that we collaborate with in terms of really figuring out, it's not that it's not impossible, but in terms, and again, the protection is on the school side, that the school needs to be protected. If they're interested in engaging with somebody that may not have work authorization. Like I said, and I know that some charter schools, some private schools do contracts with independent contractors. I believe some colleges also contract with like adjunct faculty. Any contracting opportunity is available regardless of immigration status, but if there's already a record in the system anywhere of somebody losing their work authorization, that's where that challenge may come up.
Okay, so if there's actually there's information that they had work authorization that they no longer have, that is an issue that the school should be considering. Do you know if it's possible for schools to actually form their own LLC? Are you aware of some schools that have done that, or is that something that community colleges might want to consider in terms of forming a class around how to help do this, or writing some more structure around how they could actually help individuals learn more about entrepreneurship and how to effectively step out into the world in that capacity?
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways that could be done. I think that, I think community colleges could work with their business departments and host, have an independent study course that's all about incorporating a business. So again, there's different models that individuals can choose from. In addition to that, the school doesn't necessarily have to create an LLC or a worker co-op. It could be created by a group of individuals with support from individuals from a university. So it doesn't have to be like in the name of the university. It could totally be its own independent worker co-op LLC that collaborates with a university. So for more information about that, I would definitely refer folks to Democracy at Work Institute that are really the experts in the creation and incubation of worker co-ops.
That's excellent. Another question, thank you so much. Another question that came in, Ileana, is just in general, what would you say are some of the biggest issues that entrepreneurs come up against as they're trying to start their business, or as they're kind of going from the idea of, I want to be an entrepreneur, to actually forming their first contract or talking to their first individual and starting their business?
So as I mentioned before, it's very much about a mindset. I think that oftentimes, I think that colleges often like drill the entrepreneurship out of us. I know in my experience, I went through my entire higher education with no one really telling me about, what I could do as a consultant in my given field. So I think that in general, there's not enough information out there to expose individuals about entrepreneurship. So I think the mindset is number one, is really thinking about how can I transfer my skills, what else can I learn that's going to be marketable in a business? So I think part of it is just really taking the time to understand, what's exciting out there related to my field. It could be anything. In math, what's exciting in math? Data analytics. Everybody wants to know about data analytics, data visualization. So then that's going to make me think about, then perhaps I should understand, what are the different software that is used for data visualization, for data analytics? Is there maybe a training, a certification I can do? And then from there, once I feel equipped with and knowledgeable about the work, then it's a matter of casting a wide net. I always tell individuals, cold calling, cold messaging is one of the best ways to get clients. Definitely using technology, using LinkedIn as an online portfolio, using social media. And if you email 1,000 individuals, I guarantee maybe one or two is actually going to be a really great success if you find that these individuals are looking for the particular expertise that you can offer. And then in addition to that is getting the support. There's a lot of support out there, more than I would have imagined prior to me jumping in and doing the research and identifying these organizations that support entrepreneurs. There's a lot of information, and it's just a matter of asking for help. At any stage of the business, I guarantee that there's support for entrepreneurs.
Great. That's really excellent advice. We also had another question that came in, Ileana, talking about live scans. Do you have any understanding about live scans, or what individuals might need to do as undocumented individuals to actually have a live scan taken?
Oh man, again, because I am not in those industries, if that person could email me, and then from there I can check in with our partners at Pre-Health Dreamers to learn more about that.
That sounds great. So does anybody else have any other questions? I know that there's been a lot of information that was shared today. I do just want to remind people that a lot of the resources that Ileana has been referencing, I've been throwing into the chat. You can also find them at our Immigrants Rising website under resources, so just immigrantsrising.org and looking under the resources tab. But we just have 2 more minutes if anybody else has questions. I see that one popped up in another area. I would just say, Ileana, could you just reiterate in the last minute or two, for an educator, for a counselor, what do you think is the top 2 things that they could do quickly to just make sure that this information gets out?
A couple of things. We are working on some flyers that I think would be excellent to have. We do have this great resource called the Quick Facts related to independent contracting. I completely understand that entrepreneurship has a lot, and it's a lot to understand. And even I don't have the answers to like every single business idea or every single stage of the business. So even just having something to hand out to the students that then refer students to our resources is probably one of the best things you can do. In addition to that, like I mentioned in the tips, in the tips, creating a network within your own institution is probably one of the best ways to support the students that I oftentimes cannot be available to every single person. And that's really just not sustainable. So finding ways for your university, for your college to be sustainable with and using its own network is probably the best advice I can give. But definitely make sure that you are referring individuals to our resources. We've worked really hard to and collaborated with many organizations and lawyers. So please take advantage of all our resources.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Ileana. If anybody has individual questions that were not answered, please go ahead and email Ileana, as she said, ileana@immigrantsrising.org. And I just give it back to you, Ileana, to close it out.
Thank you so much, everybody, for your time. And again, I encourage you to check out the other webinars that are happening tomorrow and Friday. Thank you so much to Nancy for organizing and for really spearheading this week of action. Thank you.